Hey out there, admins, how we doing? Today is Monday. It is February 14th, so that means a couple of things. It's Valentine's Day, so happy Valentine's Day to everybody. I saw the lodges through social media that several lodges had nice events on Saturday and did quite well financially. It's good to see people getting back out, and it's good to see that our lodges are having those type of events and giving the opportunity for our members to come and partake in the lodge, and it's a win-win in those situations. I also saw where several lodges had Super Bowl parties. That was excellent. I think the vast majority of them either had something going on that day besides the Super Bowl. They had Super Bowl boards, which are legal now. Had that come up again. The Indiana Gaming Commission does allow those sports boards. There are limitations to them, but that's all online if you want to find the information for that. That gives our members another reason to come out. I don't know if any of my squares won. I hope I did. I hope I won somewhere. I was on several lodges. Um, and of course, I want to congratulate Matt Stafford. I wasn't necessarily a Rams fan, but I'm kind of glad that he actually won. He had some rough years in Detroit, so I was kind of pulling for him. I'm sure most people around here in Indiana were kind of pulling for the Bengals, never winning one before. But I think Joe Burrow is going to be around for a while, so I think they'll have more opportunities. But I won't talk sports to everybody. Got to move on and talk about some things going on. So also being February 14th means tomorrow is the 15th, and that means your heart of the community needs to be reported in LCL. Um, a couple of things there. We have lodges that are not doing the proper procedures, and Moose International is getting on lodges' cases about having dispensations for fundraisers. There's a couple of things that's happening. You're going to not get dispensations for fundraisers if you are reporting having fundraisers in the heart of the community and then uh, not getting the dispensation for that. You're going to get in trouble if you're having, especially if you're having open events and people from aren't from the lodge in the lodge doing fundraising events. Um, we have a problem where we've asked for a dispensation for a lodge, and then in QuickBooks, we never see the check written for that event. Um, there are other reasons why that may not show up properly. Maybe it was written to a different organization, listed somewhere different, or something like that. But the Chief Compliance Office can look on QuickBooks Online, and if you're asking for several dispensations for like a weekly event, and let's say it's to a youth sports league team, they're going to expect to see checks written to that youth sports team. And if that's not being done, there's going to be questions that are going to have to be answered. So we need to make sure we're doing that. And that is an IRS thing also. Again, like I always say, we're not making extra work for you. That needs to be reported. The IRS wants to come in and see what money you're donating to, what charities and what good works you're doing in the community. That's one of the first things you can look at to let them know what the lodge has been doing. Along that lines, it being February, and there's been several emails from Moose International, emails from me. We've talked about it. It is the time for the Rocker Fund, and we need to make sure that every lodge is doing that. This template was sent out. They don't send hard copies and mail them to lodges anymore. It's an email document. You have to print them up. Every lodge must be doing this. Print those squares up, those placards, give them to your bartenders and officers, go out and ask for those donations, and make sure they're being hung somewhere in the building so people can see that that their money is, that someone's collecting their money, that they're being recognized for the money they're giving, and that it's a Moose Heart, Moose Haven fundraiser. Another thing I need to cover, and I will attach this document to this email as well, as it will be coming from Moose International. There's a nice little brochure that talks about people that want to run for office. I suggest you print this up, and they've changed one thing in here that actually is kind of nice. So it says you want to be an officer, and it kind of covers those situations for the offices and what their jobs entail. It wouldn't hurt giving this to the current officers also. That way, if they're thinking about running for something else, also they can kind of see this. But a couple things I do want to cover in here. It kind of breaks down to the bare essentials what each office is entailed to do, especially the elected officers, because we're talking about the nominating forms and nominating committee for elected offices. I won't go over the entire paper, but something I do want because we're having trouble in some lodges. And I know a lot of people always think this is just a problem in my lodge, but we're having this problem in several lodges. And the very first thing it says for president is that he is the fraternal leader of the lodge. He's in charge of fraternalism. He sets the example. He runs the meetings, things like that. The president is not in charge of the lodge. The president is not in charge of the social quarters. No officer on the board that's a regularly elected officer is in charge of the social quarters other than the administrator, and if the lodge has a social quarters manager, which in almost all of my lodges except for a couple, that's the same person. So we need to maybe remind the presidents that they are not in charge of the lodge itself. They are in charge of the fraternal side of the organization. The board as a whole runs the lodge as far as pointing the administrator in certain directions when it comes to certain things where they want their money spent. Still, we're talking about prices being set in the social quarters. Still comes from the board of officers. That may not be the case forever because it is getting to the point where we're having trouble with boards that do not want to run the social quarters and the lodge profitably, and it has to be ran profitably. But I'll cover more of that in a second. I also want to point out that it does talk about the chaplain in here. The chaplain does have things they have to take care of. They should be on the audit committee, and that audit committee report should be done at least once a quarter. And that's the one that shows the money that's in the both bank accounts, that shows the percentage of cost of goods in the kitchen and in the social quarters as far as liquor and beer, shows that your AR payments being paid to Moose International, your insurances are covered. Now, the chaplain's on that committee, but he is not the chairperson. The president should be appointing someone else to be that chairperson of that committee, and they should be doing an audit at least once a quarter. That's different than at the second meeting of the month when they're showing the financials and showing the P&L and all that stuff. That's two different things. Also, where it shows on here for trustees, and what it says is that one of their job titles is that each week they should examine and approve all bills except reoccurring overhead. What that means is that they should be approving any bill that's not a normal reoccurring bill. So the gas bill, the water bill, all those types of things, cable and TV, those don't have to be approved to be paid. They have to be paid. Now, they should be viewing those bills because they should be seeing that there was a check written for that and approved. And that way, down the road, they should say, it seems like that cable bill's getting awful high. Maybe we need to look around or think some other ideas. Or, holy moly, why did, the gas bill in this one month go up, 110% and the weather wasn't that bad? We need that looked into. But they're not approving those to be paid. Those are supposed to automatically be paid. What they're supposed to be approving are non-reoccurring bills. Something special has popped up. And I know a lot of lodges have problems where, they say, well, there was a plumbing emergency and this had to be done, and so on and so forth. That's fine. And what most lodges do is, and this should be written in the minutes somewhere, technically it should be written in the house committee, or not, it's not house committee anymore, I'm sorry, in the lodge policy book. And a lot of lodges are not keeping proper policies themselves and keep it written down somewhere. We're going to be taking care of that issue in the future. But what I'm saying is most lodges have it written down somewhere that, it's $500 and that's the limit. And if there's a plumbing issue and you have to have a plumber come in something, you don't even have to ask about that. That will be approved the next meeting. But if it's, $1,000, $1,500, we're going to have to wait, and we're going to have a board of officers meeting and discuss that. And again, you don't have to wait 2 weeks if it's 2 weeks till your next meeting. The officers can get together with a quorum and have an officers meeting at any time to approve something like that. Again, if it's an emergency, we have to do what we have to do. So if we have to make phone calls on that and get, 5 officers to sign off and say that's perfectly fine, that's okay. Now we're talking about emergency situations, so that doesn't happen that often. But again, basically, they're supposed to be looking at unusual expenditures, and those should be approved. And again, that's a board vote, but that's what the trustees should be looking at. Something else that covers on here that I kind of like, which is why you may want to print this up and have some at the hanging up around the lodge. I'd hang them up around the lodge, but I'd maybe have the bartender have some, because it does have the putting your name in for consideration if you're looking at running an office. I always have people asking, well, where do we get that? And I said, well, it's in the handbook. You can copy and paste that one. It's actually printed on here, and it says, I attest that I've read this brochure. I want to be considered for this position, and so on and so forth. But also, it has general responsibilities, and there's one on here that I want to cover. It goes back to what we were talking about officers earlier on the lodge. One of the first things it says is devoting their best efforts to improve the financial security of the lodge. And this is happening in a lot of lodges where they're not doing that. They have a fiduciary commitment to the lodge to make it run properly. And if they are not doing that, and that's everything from making sure the administrator is putting money in the bank, and we're auditing the social quarters, and we're looking at those percentages of cost of goods, it's making sure they're charging enough for, liquor and alcohol, liquor and beer, and food in the kitchen. And it also comes down to things like entertainment. We have too many lodges that are going out and paying a band $500 to play in the social quarters. It's not a big fundraising event. It's just for their members. And what they do not understand is that at a minimum, they have to make $1,500 to cover that cost of a band for $500. And at that point, they've made no money. That's to break even, because they have to pay the band. You have to, a third of that's going to cover the cost of the alcohol that you're serving. And that's if you're doing everything right and getting your beer and liquor at 30%. Most lodges are running over that right now. So in the long run, if you didn't do $1,500 to cover that $500 band during that event, you have lost money. And again, that is on the board of officers to make sure the lodge is running profitably. We've done pretty good going through COVID. We survived the shutdown. But what we have is the daily operations of a lodge. They're going in the negative, and they need to make sure that they're having events, that are bringing members in that don't necessarily cost the lodge money. Pool tournaments, dart tournaments, euchre tournaments, all those type of events. And having bands on the weekend. I know lots of lodges want to have bands, but they need to make sure that they are running that profitably. And I can tell you, almost every lodge that has a band, they're not making money in the long run. And that's something we need to look at. But again, it's the overall responsibility of an officer to make sure the lodge is running profitably. So the administrator should be going back and saying, here's how much we spent, here's how much we made. And should be making suggestions. We need to be charging more for beer and liquor, or we need to up our food prices for this particular item in the kitchen, or, whatever it may be. We're going to have a fundraising event, and we need to make sure that we're actually, charging a cover charge for this event, or whatever it may be. But anyways, but this is a good document, so I would print it up. I would make sure I give it to all the officers. I'd have it posted somewhere on one of your information boards, and then maybe have some copies made up, print on both sides or whatever, and give them to your bartenders, so the people that are considered running for office can pick one up. They can look at that, and they can sign that the piece of paper where it says they want to be considered for an office. All right, we're at 10 minutes. I don't want to go on too long. I think I covered everything I needed to cover. Oh, it's 15 because I had to edit this video together. Sorry, it's more like 15 minutes. Everybody have a happy Valentine's Day, and we'll see you next time. Bye.